Hello and welcome to Books and Beyond. We're back for my third season. It's been a little while since I've done the show, but back in the saddle, as they say. My name is Jimmy Bennett, and I'm an author myself. I've written 4 books called the William Gillette series. And one other thing I want to do is just give a little shout out to CAPA, the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association. The Southeastern chapter meets every third Monday at 6:30. Next month it'll be a Zoom meeting. After that, I'm hoping we'll be back in the library where we've taken up residency. It's great networking for writers that are starting out, or people that are publishers or editors or anybody that has anything to do with the written word. It's a great group of people, and it gives you a lot of information, a lot of inspiration, and I hope you'll join us. And so anyways, today I have a very special guest, somebody I've been waiting a long time to have on the show, is Nicholas Checker. Nicholas, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh,
Appreciate
no, I tell you, it's you're a busy guy. It's hard to pin you down anyways.
Yeah.
You're pretty proficient, and you keep yourself moving. So you've done just about it all. You've been a screenwriter, a filmmaker, novelist, teacher. So let's start with your filmmaking and screenwriting. How did that start? When did you get into that?
A number of years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Peter Filardi. Peter is from Mystic, originally from Mystic, he and his brother Jason. And he wrote the movies, the Flatliners and The Craft, the Salem's Lot remake, and he worked up a very good rapport with Stephen King. So he and his brother, who always dreamed of doing a horror film together, did Chapelwaite.
Yep.
For one of the Prime TV channels. It was like, I think, an 8-part series. It was, and I had been writing stage plays and fiction. I always wanted to learn screenwriting, but I could never grasp the format properly. And I went to a seminar of Peter's. We had never met. He knew me from coming down to the Mystic Community Center and watching his cousins perform in the gymnastics exhibitions there because I coached the team. But I hadn't met him until I went to the seminar at the Mystic Noank Library and asked him some key questions, and then afterwards said I would love to get some hints on how to do screenwriting. He read a play of mine which would go on to be published, Kangaroo Court. I had mentioned that play to you earlier. And he said, well, you're a very witty and clever writer. I like your style, and you write very visually. I'll teach you screenwriting. And he did. And so after that, I did do a number of short independent films. And the one that stands out most prominently, which was directed by Alec Aston, formerly of Sonolist. Now he has his own filming company right in Noank. But Alec directed a film I wrote called The Curse of Micah Rood, which received an awful lot of awards. It was shown everywhere, and it featured an actor who was a friend of mine. He's a little older than me, but he was at UConn when I was there. Ron Palillo, who played Arnold Horshack on Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, okay.
And he played the lead character in it, Micah Rood, a recluse who is tormented by a foul deed he commits, and then it comes back to haunt him. And it's based on an actual legend.
Wow.
And so that made its way around a lot, and I was fortunate to have a terrific director like Alec. But tracing it all the way back, I had a number of independent films. I had one about eminent domain abuse and homelessness called Trashed, a supernatural piece called Shadim, The Snowman, the Radio Rage, which was a dark stab at hate radio talk shows. Had terrific directors, wonderful actors, but it all goes back to Peter Filardi teaching me the craft.
Right.
Not The Craft, the movie he wrote,
Right.
but the craft of screenwriting. And then his brother Jason also helped a good deal. So
Did you start writing screenplays when you started writing? Is
No.
that how you
No, I was writing fiction first.
Okay.
I cut my teeth on fiction and journalism. I was writing features for the newspaper, various papers, but I did a lot of them for the Times editions
Right.
of the day paper, editor Lee Howard. And I did an awful lot of those, but storytelling is what I love to do. For me, it's an adventure. It's exploring. We can't always go into, we can't be part of all these worlds we read about or that we see in the movies, but we can create them ourselves. We can go on our own voyages. And I have a lot of friends who they go around, they tour a lot, and I envy that, but you're still a tourist.
You're right.
When you read and you study, especially when you read a book, well, you explore more than most people do. I've often said reading is the vitamins of the mind. And when you are creating and writing, you are going on a journey. You are a bona fide explorer because, as far as I'm concerned, you have to research. You have to know everything you're writing. People say write about what you know, and I agree, but then I also say, and if you don't know it, then learn it. And then it's just damned exciting.
Yes, it is.
And then to start writing and the ideas come to you and to start creating and crafting a story. And I think Tolkien said it best, just tell a cracking good tale.
Right. You know, I found that too. I found that when I've done writing, you know, and I've done a little research about times in the area and stuff like that. And it gives you more ideas and
Yes.
better ideas. You know, even if you have an original idea, you think, oh, this is really good. And then you read something and go, well, that's even better.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And incorporating that kind of thing. I just have one question. I just want one more question with the screenplay writing. Now, do you use a type of software or anything when you screenwrite? Or do you do it out by hand or?
Well, it can, ultimately there is a program. They're always upgrading them. There are screenplay programs that I've used, particularly when I was heavily into screenwriting. You can, if you do it by hand, you know, I like to handwrite everything first. And some people laugh at that. I said, well, there is a writer who does everything first on legal yellow pad
Right.
and blue pencil. And they go, oh, come on, who's that? I said, George Lucas. You know?
Yeah.
So then the laughing stops quickly there. So I like to handwrite it out first because I'm more mobile that way. You can't always plug in someplace. I like to go outside. I like to go on benches. I like to go to the beach. And so my notebooks come with me. Then if you're going to do that, though, screenwriting, you still have to write it in the correct format.
Right.
Then it is possible to know the format and through Microsoft Word to simulate it almost exactly. Though what's preferred by a production company is the actual screenwriting program, and it's much easier that way.
Right.
But there's a way you can learn it through Word.
Right.
And it's screenplay writing is defined as telling a story through pictures. But the format is so key because you have to remember you are creating the story through images. Even in, say, a courtroom drama, anything that's dialogue heavy, you still have to write something that implies visual imagery.
Right.
And when you can, dial down the dialogue and ramp up the imagery.
Right.
So.
See, that's one thing. A friend of mine has been adapting A Castle Christmas to a screenplay. You know, which I really appreciate.
Oh, yeah.
I've tried to. It's so funny, but you know, I have the picture in my head, and I describe it with words and the dialogue. You know, which is how the story's driven. But like you say, in a screenplay, there's a lot of unnecessary. You don't need to put all the descriptions in. It's right
Right.
there. People are seeing it, and you know how to work it out. But I tell you, I admire that, and I think that's unbelievable. So, after your screenplay writing, is that when you started writing novels?
No, the irony is, I wrote my first two novels before I ever even attempted a screenplay. And one of them came within a whisper, anything of getting into Little Brown and Company, one of the number one young adult publishing
Right.
companies. And the other one was also anthropomorphic. See, the first one originally was called The Saga of the Whistling Folk, and it takes place in the sea. The characters are dolphins, whales, sharks. And the other, Scratch, is set in the world of feral cats and wild creatures and domestic animals. And when I had written both of those, it was back, I was really young when I wrote those. So there wasn't an internet.
Yeah.
There was a market that was very, very confined, anthropomorphism, where you were giving animals human traits, where like the Jungle Book, say, or Watership Down, where the characters speak. There's not a lot of companies that solicit those. So you had to make tons of you had several copies of these. Then you had to get these boxes and sometimes buy them that you could submit, make photocopies, send it out, postage, because this was all by the U.S. Postal Service. There was no such thing as sending it by email because there was no internet. And then return postage. So it limited how much you could get your work out there. And both of these came so close, and then I got bushwhacked by the first stage play I wrote, the premise of it, the Elegy for an Icon about John Mason and the Pequot War. So these two, they just fell into mothballs for many years. There was an article in Writer's Digest, which is a publication put out by Writer's Digest. It's Writer's Yearbook, it's called. And there was an article that shows a guy opening up this chest, and all this glowing gold is coming out. And it said, "There's gold in them, thar files, throw nothing away." So I never did throw anything away. Years later, I, for a number of reasons, said, let me bring Scratch back out again. I had mentioned to you earlier that Druids was first, but Scratch actually was the first novel to get out there. And I pulled it out, and a friend of mine, David Tetzlaff, the former film studies professor of Conn College, showed me the magic of scanning. So I got any case, I made a file, dressed the story up a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I want this one out there. So before I even went to a publisher, I learned about Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. Put it out on Kindle, and a lot of people started buying it. So I thought that was pretty neat. So there was a long story about a screenplay I had written. It had begun so much longer ago as a novel, and I know we have limited time today. So eventually I wrote it as a screenplay and called it Druids. Jason Filardi's manager absolutely loved it, and he and Peter both said to me, "This is the first one of your stories. We have no critique at all. It works." And I was so excited. I thought this was it. And I talked to the manager, but he said, "You're not that well known a screenwriter, though. He's done mostly small independent films. Why don't you adapt it into a novel?" So I was pretty disappointed because I thought he was going to market it for me. And
Yeah.
so I put that aside. And then I saw people reading Scratch still and buying it there on Kindle, Amazon. And so I did the adaptation, and I sent it out to a publisher out of California called Oak Tree Press at the time. And the young intern said, "Well, we do mostly murder mysteries, but I like fantasy because it's a fantasy medieval adventure. I'm greatly inspired by Tolkien and Michael Moorcock,
Yeah.
the great fantasy and science fiction writers." So I created this magical world, and I sent it out, and she liked it and said, "I want to show it to the publisher." I said, "Okay, sure." I thought she just wanted to read it. And then the publisher got a hold of me a week later, Billy Johnson, and she said to me, "I'd like to publish this. I go, "Yeah, I know. I've heard you do mostly murder mysteries and romances." She said, "Yeah, but I like the characters a lot. So I'm going to offer to publish it." Small press, but they accepted it. And so Druids came out as a novel, and so they put it out in hard copy and in Kindle. They wound up with scratch as well, because I asked them, I saw that the publisher did what I did. She took care of feral cats. I became Facebook friends with
Yeah.
her. I said, look, I've got this book, Kindle Amazon. It's on Kindle, but I see that you like to take care of feral cats. I got a whole novel about them. If I sent it to you and you liked it, would you publish it maybe just in hard copy? So Amazon has the Kindle rights. So she said, well, let me look at it. She liked it. So they agreed to publish Scratch just in, paperback.
Nice.
And so that worked out really nicely with both those books. A couple years later, it was a small publishing house. She suffered a stroke and passed away. The company went under. I got all my rights back and put them both back out on Amazon.
Okay.
Under what I call Prowler Publishing, which is named after one of my old cats.
All right. Now I do want to get. I want to talk about your last two books, The Saga of Marathon.
Yep.
How was that?
That began as a play at the O'Neill Theater, a play with music. And it was based on the legend of Phidippides, who ran from the battlefield of Marathon to the city of Athens, literally to save the future of democracy. It was the Persians were about to take over the known world. And Phidippides was at the battle itself. There's a longer story to it. But I found in the research, and of course being Greek and having run a marathon, I had quite an advantage there. But I found that after the Greeks defeated the Persians at Marathon, Darius got his troops back onto the ships and were going to sail around the coast to hit the city of Athens before the army could force march back. So they needed a messenger to get back there and warn them, hold, we have victory, but the Persians are coming. So Phidippides was actually a Paul Revere. Anyway, this got done as a play, and it did very, very well for itself. Years later, I wanted to adapt it into a novel, and there's a long story behind that. So I put all this work into it. Actually, Amby Burfoot was the one that persuaded me to do that. He said, Nikki, are you doing anything with the story of Phidippides again? Because the play had been resurrected and done again over at Stonington High. And I said, well, I thought about maybe making it into a novel. And he goes, just put everything aside and do that. He got me so excited about it. I dove into that. And I did. I made the adaptation much more in depth, really got into the mythology, the history, the legend, discovered so much more. And I sent it out. I went through the novel and short story writers market. I found a publishing house, medium-sized house, called Wild Rose Press in New York. Sent it to them, and they have all kinds of divisions, historical, fantasy, everything. So one of the editors there, Nancy Swanson, read it, and she loved it. She said, I want to recommend this to Rhonda Penders, the main editor, the founder of the company. They accepted it, and it got published through Wild Rose Press. And I did my book launch like I did my other two for Druids and for Scratch over at Bank Square Books. And it's out there. It's doing pretty well for itself. It's the one I would love. People say it would make a great movie. So I'm trying, man. I'm trying. Yeah. But then what happened was there was a piece I wrote, the one that almost got into Little Brown and Company, the Saga of the Whistling Folk, which was about dolphins and about a young female dolphin rebelling against the very rigid, militant mores, the customs of her clan. And in her rebellion and speaking out against it, she gets banished and discovers the things that she feared by going out into the great big ocean. They're true, that there is a greater danger stalking her pod. Does she go back to warn them? They exiled her. And would they even believe her? Because Piper in the dolphin story would be the equivalent of a teenage girl today.
Yep.
And of course, there's a teenage girl out there talking about climate change they made fun of, and
right.
She's pretty spot on, actually.
Yeah.
So in this story, having also grown up worshiping Jacques Cousteau, loving the sea, I took this story, rewrote it a little, put some new things into it, changed the name to The Legend of Kwai Coast, spelled Kwi. And people say, where'd you get that Kwai Coast from? Is that a real place? I said, no, it was my own little take on saying it was a quiet coast.
Oh, wow.
And but it's set in off of San Francisco, where with the whole thing with the continental shelf and everything, where they were living in a cove, secluded, totally unaware of the outer world, just like in Tolkien's Hobbits with the Shire.
Right.
They're unaware of what's going on out there, and so it was also a story about the voice of youth, as is the saga of Marathon. I envision Phidippides in the saga of Marathon as a untested teenager who dreams of one day being one of the elite runners, rather than just delivering little parcels
Right.
from village to village. And he gets his chance, and Piper gets her chance. And I think it's an important thing for young people to think about the world they're in and to be willing to take steps to change it for the
Right.
better. Brings me back to someone else that influenced me tremendously, the great German playwright Bertolt Brecht, who once said, if you want to change the world, change their minds. He felt when you're leaving the theater, yes, I want you I want you entertained, I want you engaged, but I want you thinking about what you saw.
Right.
And if you think there's something that you should do about it, then go ahead and take those measures. And there's one more person I like to quote, Wendy Wasserstein, the playwright. I was at a seminar of hers once, and she said, well, you're going to see and hear things every day that are going to get you angry. Don't get angry. Go home and write.
Right. There you go.
So I quote those three, Tolkien, Brecht, and Wasserstein, a lot. There's many more I could quote because I just admire them all. But I aspire to be among the people that writes meaningful things that are cracking good tales, but make you want to think, maybe make you want to do something about it too. And so that's the story of those pieces. They're available on Amazon. And obviously, my publisher in New York is it's a sizable house. As I said, I think Wild Rose Press is a medium-sized house.
I've heard of them, yeah.
So, and there's quite a few of them. But it's interesting. I did like a little prequel to Druids I called Freebooters, because in Druids I have this female knight, Lady JDN, that everybody absolutely loved. So I wrote a prequel about what it was like when she was 16 and wanting to become a knight in a male-dominated war culture. And I did that one entirely through Amazon. I didn't send that one anyway. Right. And I also figured out how to put it together and assemble it in a paperback format. And that's why I tell students of mine who are doing that, I said, listen, if I can figure it out, all things are possible. Right.
Now, talking about the students.
Yeah.
Because that's the one point I did want to bring up. You also teach.
Yes.
And now you do the Town of Groton, is it adult education program, or how do they call that?
It is now. It's the program that's generally open to the public is the short story writing program. Once upon a time, I had young people and teenagers, but I only take 6 in a class, so it's strictly adults. Every now and then, there's a special admittance of a teenager, someone that is just dying to write and shows the knack. So with consent of the instructor and me, talk to them and talk to their parents, say, well, here's how we do things. And I've had some really good ones in there. But predominantly, it's adults. And out of this program, a number of them got published. There was a short magazine, a small press out of California, out of San Francisco, and he had published a piece of mine that had been done a number of times. And I asked him, would you be willing to look at the works that my students are writing? And he said, sure, can't guarantee publication, but I will guarantee a good read. Well, by the time they sent the piece to him, grammar, punctuation, spelling, are you adhering to the principles of Strunk and White's, the elements of style? Have you followed 3-act structure? Well, they don't get to send it until they've passed through me.
Right.
And I've often said that's like getting past the Lou Gossett Jr. character in An Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah.
You know,
Before you get to fly. Yeah.
so he knows when it gets out there, this editor, that they've gone through the trial of fire and water. As a number of them were getting published, I decided, let's take the next step. So I have a program that once they've been published and they're really moving along and they want to take the step, there's an invitational program. I call it novelette writing. Novelette writing is turning also into novella writing and anthology. And I've got 1 or 2 people trying to develop novels too. So that, again, is by invitation only. I want to make sure that they've learned everything they have to learn, cut their teeth on the short story, because a novelette, novella, novel, these are short stories that kind of grew up.
Right.
Mark Twain once said, out of every novel, we can reach in and extract a short story. Out of every short story, we can grow it into a novel. And then I tell my students, we know this to be true because Mark Twain said so.
Right.
You know? So some of them are trying to take short stories and expand them. Others want to jot out a whole new piece. And so they're working on that.
So you do this through the town of Groton.
Yes.
So they should look for the adult education if they're interested and they want to sign up.
Yeah, they would get in touch with the town of Groton Parks and Rec.
Okay.
And just ask for the short story writing program.
Okay.
And there's a number they can call, 860-536-5680. Ask for a wonderful woman named Asia. She runs the office.
Yep.
And she's a gem. And you talk to her and you'll get everything you need to know. I think my email is being sent out here. Anybody that wants to know anything else, I'll respond. It is a program I run also in coordination with the Gard Arts Center and Flock Makerspace, and we use the Thames Club. It's called Exploratory Playwriting.
Good.
And we've done quite a little tour of, they're called One Character Wonders. It focuses on a single character that basically treats the audience like it's your confidant. And that character takes you on an emotional tour de force.
Right. Well, that's. I'm glad. I hope that people, are interested. A lot of times, people want to take that first step. They just don't know how.
Right.
And so, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being on the show today, Nicholas. We're running out of time.
Thanks for having me.
It was great. Hope to have you back again sometime. I'll probably be running into you here and there.
I think so.
So that's all for today on Books and
Thank
Beyond.
you very much.
Thank you very much for tuning in. Our next show will be one of our popular cooking shows. So stay tuned. Take care.